This is Two Broads Talking Politics. On today's episode, we talk to Dr. Arati Kreibich, who's running for Congress in the New Jersey 5th District. In the episode, we say that the New Jersey primary is scheduled to be in June. However, just after we recorded, the New Jersey governor announced that the primary had been moved to July 7th. Hi everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast family of podcasts, and I am thrilled to be back on today with my co-host, who has been a little bit swamped under with work for the past few weeks, Sophy. Hi, Sophy.
Hey, Kelly. It's great to be back. I'm very excited. Hopefully I can continue to be back. We'll see how this pandemic goes.
Yes, indeed. And joining us today is Arati Kreibich, who is running for Congress in the New Jersey 5th District. Hi, Arati.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we are thrilled to have you with us. So let's just jump into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Congress.
Yes, great. So I am a mom, like you all. I am a neuroscientist by training. I'm an immigrant. I am an elected official, council member in Glen Rock. And, all of these form my identities, right? And give me an important perspective, I think, on where we are in the world and where I think we need to go. And I'm running for Congress because I really think that we need to elect more folks like me, more scientists, more women, more immigrants, more people with a different perspective than the status quo, and frankly, more political candidates who are not the status quo, who are not politics as usual, who are not the establishment as it has been. And I'm running because I have an elected Congress member who I supported in 2016 when he flipped the district, and I reluctantly supported in 2018 because I am really wedded to the idea that we need to keep our district as blue as possible. And not only has he not really fought for the things that I thought he was going to be fighting for all of us, he's really undermined the democratic policies, the kind of policies that I think that we need to put out there that are helping people in general across the board, right? And to create real change, particularly now, given what is happening in the White House, given what is happening in the world with COVID-19. I think we need to elect folks who are actually going to be standing up for our values and who are going to be fighting the fight on behalf of all of us. That's why I'm running for Congress.
Can you tell us a little bit about New Jersey's 5th District? Like what is it like demographically and culturally? Just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 5th District is in North Jersey. And so it is gerrymandered. So it includes a lot of Bergen County, which is suburbia, which is a very suburban, lots of folks who commute into New York City, for example, as well. We have a couple of towns in Passaic County, and then a few towns, or at least half of Sussex and Warren County, which are more rural. So it's a mix of everything. It is mostly Caucasian in terms of racial demographics, but we do also have a significant minority of other nationalities, other ethnicities as well. And I think that's an important point. It's changed quite a bit, even in the last 4 years. So when we look at where we were in 2014, and we look at political, demographics in that way as well. We had a lot of folks. It was much more of a Republican district, and even since 2014, we've been trending blue. So now in 2020, we're actually solidly blue. We have more registered Democrats than we have registered Republicans. But in New Jersey and in NJ5, really, we have a lot of folks who are unaffiliated. And I think that they are unaffiliated in general because, New Jersey politics sucks, right? Like that's kind of that's the stereotypical idea of establishment politics, particularly in New Jersey. And I think that's the reason why people are reluctant to go one way or the other. And I think that particularly now more than ever, what we need are folks who are going to stand up, who are breaking that mold, right, of what people expect politicians to be. And I think what resonates with folks, regardless of socioeconomic or political leanings, is that people who are standing up, who want to fight for their constituents, are going to have stories that resonate with them and who they believe are going to be honest and not part of a system that is corrupt and not part of a system that takes advantage of people.
So I believe the primary is scheduled for early June. Is that still the plan? Is that likely to happen? And what has all of this, being sheltering in place and everything done to especially primary elections? I know it could be that we're all still dealing with this going into the general in November, but this has been sort of a turn on a dime moment for people running in primaries. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been, I have to say that right now, the primary is still June 2nd. However, we also know that our governor mentioned just a couple of days ago that he would be stunned if it stayed June 2nd. So we're anticipating that it's going to be pushed forward, that's going to be postponed. There are some dates floating around, but we don't know yet. We think that it's maybe July. That is, the latest that folks are kind of banding about. So we don't know. There's a certain amount of uncertainty there. But really the whole world right now feels like it's so uncertain on so many different levels, right? So we are in Bergen County. I live in Bergen County right now, and we have the most COVID-19 positive cases in all of New Jersey. I think at last count we had more than 1,000. And my husband, works actually at the hospital where we have the most amount of cases within Bergen County. So for us, it's, we feel like we're in the middle of this in so many different ways. There's so many friends and family that I have that are at the front line in terms of healthcare workers, and I know neighbors and other friends for whom job hours have been cut, who are facing unemployment, who are facing loss of their businesses. And of course, I have kids like you all do who are doing this crisis distance learning, right? And we're all trying to weather this crisis together in a way that we are keeping sane, and we're trying to protect ourselves and our family and our communities. I mean, my parents are in the high risk group. They're not living with us, but we certainly haven't seen them for more than a month at this point. So yeah, definitely the whole community is feeling this on so many different ways. We decided as a campaign, I decided even before Bergen County was shut down, in New Jersey, that we had shelter in place orders that were given, I decided to actually cancel and suspend all in-person events, at least I think a week before that. So we went virtual because I kind of saw this coming, a while before we were made to. And so we are all virtual now. And we're lucky that we've had folks on the campaign. I have a great team. We've done really well moving to a virtual model in terms of trying to make sure that we are still organizing, that we're still reaching out to voters as much as possible virtually. But really my focus for the last couple of weeks has been to make sure we're doing everything we can in terms of mutual aid. One of the first things that I ended up doing was making sure that we were raising funds for food pantries, because the lore is that, that certain parts of our district are very affluent, but food insecurity, as I've known being a council member here, is something that people don't talk about. It's very real. It's very prevalent. One of the first things that, happens is that food pantries, have gone empty. It's such a complicated issue in terms of volunteers not being able to come in and, all the logistics of that. So we've done a lot in terms of raising money for our food pantries. We've done PPE equipment. Unfortunately, we've had to, of course, like a lot of folks, gather PPE for our frontline healthcare workers. So we've helped with that. We continue to do that, and, have COVID-19 resources on our webpage. So when I reach out, or when our volunteers are reaching out to voters, it's really more of a check-in call to make sure that folks are okay, make sure that folks are healthy. And if they need help, we are connecting them with the resources that the state has put together, that, locally is put together. So really, first and foremost, we were trying to help our community as much as possible, across all 4 counties. And I think, within that, in terms of campaigning, of course, we can't go door to door. Of course, we're not meeting people in person. And for somebody like me who really enjoys that connection, who really finds value in that, and I've always done, that's particularly difficult. But we know that we can still keep up a sense of community, and we can still connect people in different ways. So with phone banking, with texting, with all of that, I think the last 4 phone banks that we've done, again, mostly check-in calls, we've done more than 15,000 phone calls, which is substantial for a campaign our size with the kind of team that we have. So I think that the focus for us has been reaching as many people in our community as possible and trying to help as much as possible.
You mentioned earlier that you're a neuroscientist and that you think it's important to elect more people to public office who are scientists. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that's important and what your background as a scientist sort of gives you in terms of being able to understand the problems facing our
Yeah, no, I think that now more than ever, I think folks in the middle of this pandemic are also understanding the value of having people in Congress or people in decision-making roles who are going to understand science and data, who are going to be able to focus on that, be able to see something like a public health crisis of this magnitude coming down and advocate to make sure that we are prepared for this, right? So now we need folks who are going to help us get out of this crisis by helping the most amount of people that we possibly can right now. And also to be able to have policies that make us more resilient in the future. This administration, I think, has been the most anti-science administration that I can think of ever. And this crisis has been exacerbated so much more by this unwillingness or blindness to science. We've muzzled our public health experts. We've silenced experts and scientists who've been talking and raising alarm bells about this for months. This is not something that was a tsunami that nobody could have predicted. This was clearly something that we saw coming for months, right? And we've all, and people were warned. Our scientists were trying to raise alarm bells. And what we didn't have was enough advocacy and enough people standing up and saying, hey, we need to be much better prepared for this moving forward. So I think, within the crisis, I think we need more scientists in Congress who are going to speak out against what this administration is doing and advocate for policy that's based in truth and be able to really advocate against the attempts that are made to intimidate researchers and scientists who are telling the truth about public health, but also about things like climate change. It really has far-reaching implications across the board. Personally, in terms of what being a scientist and what I bring to the table, I think it's I've been trained as a scientist. This is what I've been doing my entire adult life. So the way I think and the way I make decisions is rooted in that. And what that really means is looking at the evidence, looking at the data, being able to research that question and understand and be able to interpret and analyze what that data is showing. But what I also bring to the table, I think like a lot of us do, right, are various different perspectives from being women or being, from our gender, whatever we identify with, from our life experiences, from being an immigrant. And I think what that brings is this understanding that the questions that are asked may not always be the right questions, and the assumptions that are made may not always be the right assumptions. So I think this duality of, looking at the data, but also taking a step back and saying, where did this data come from? And what are the assumptions around it? I think both of it are really important philosophically, right? And being able to kind of bring that to the table, I think is really important for all of us in decision-making roles.
You mentioned that you immigrated to the U.S. when you were 11. There are still not that many members of Congress who are themselves immigrants. What would that look like to have someone with your experiences, to know what your parents went through moving here in Congress? What would that mean for solving immigration issues? What are the kinds of things you would like to see Congress doing to help people both immigrate to the U.S. and then feel safe once they're here culturally, make sure that there are not people attacking them for who they are or what they look like?
Yeah. So one of the reasons I got into this race was immigration reform, and my story as an immigrant. So as I mentioned, I came to this country when I was 11. I still remember getting off the airplane at JFK. I still remember trying to corral my really pesky younger brothers, who are still pesky, just a lot older now. And they were very excited. I remember being very excited, being very hopeful, but also being very anxious as we got off that plane. And I remember my youngest brother asking if he was going to recognize our dad, because my dad had come here a couple of years earlier to save money and bring us all over. So I was there with my brothers and my mom. And I remember all of that, right? I remember this hope and excitement because my parents believed in this promise of America. They believed that, coming here and working hard was going to make our dreams come true. And I remember the anxiety of being in a whole new environment and a whole new, unknown really for me. And so while we were really fortunate, even though my parents were not wealthy, were rather poor, at times had to work 2 jobs simultaneously, we were very fortunate in the kinds of opportunities that we had, and that we were able to work hard and be able to really, my dreams definitely came true. I always wanted to be a scientist, and I am one. And we were very fortunate that happened for us. But the reality is, of course, that we have systems in place that unfortunately ensure that this is not the way it works for everybody, and that this is the way it should work for everybody. And that inequity, I feel very strongly and personally. And I'm very passionate about making sure that we do everything that we possibly can to lower those barriers, to be able to have the kinds of opportunities I've had and be able to really work for them for everybody across the board. And I bring that perspective to the way I govern at the city council, and the way that we'll be able to change things at a congressional level, at a national level, at a federal level. I will say that, that is also the reason why I got into politics in the way I did. So after the 2016 elections, and that election day is another memory that I hold, with the same sense of excitement and anxiety and eventually dread. That election day, we were very excited. My kids were 8 and 11. They were very excited with me to go volunteer, and we voted. We went out to Pennsylvania to a swing district to try and get out the vote. We were all wearing pantsuits. Matching pantsuits while we were knocking on doors. And we came home and we expected it to be a celebration, and it really wasn't. And my kids were devastated. It was hard as a parent to explain to them what happened. It is still very difficult to explain to them, what has happened. And as, in addition to that deep disappointment and devastation that we had the day of the elections for us, in the weeks that followed, hate crimes were spiking, right? In our communities, people were talking, people weren't actually talking, but we were seeing a lot of reports of folks having encounters that they hadn't before, other people being much more emboldened to speak out in hate, to do things that we wouldn't have imagined to do in the same extent before the elections. And in this atmosphere, my 8-year-old, came to me one night, really upset and worried, genuinely worried, deeply afraid that I was going to be deported, that I was not going to be able to be his mom anymore in America, and that my parents, his grandparents, were going to be even more targeted, and the same thing was going to happen to them. Because they have much more of an accent than I do, and they look quite a bit more Indian than I do. And it was devastating, right, to hear that. And I still, remember how horrible that felt, that my child was so worried for me in, where we had come up and, where we were in this relatively safe neighborhood where felt like we had done everything we could to become part of the society, that I had done everything I could to become part of the society, to, and as much as we loved and are proud of being American citizens, that my child felt worried for me in this way was definitely felt like a failure as a parent and a failure of our community. But the thing is, I was able to hug him and say, this is okay. This is not going to happen to me. And this is why. And here's why people are safe. But the reality is, this is not the way it happens for everybody. The reality is that there are so many of us who are not able to reassure our kids in that way, especially now. The reality is that there are so many of us who are feeling so much more insecure and more vulnerable, either because we look a particular way, or we dress a particular way, or we speak a particular way, or because of who we love or how we identify. And that was unacceptable to me. And I really felt as if I needed to step up and do a lot more. And I needed to advocate in all the different ways that I could, which is really how I got to marching and organizing and eventually stepping up to run for council. And, it's the same story as to why I decided to run for Congress at the end of the day. My Congress member, who, again, as I mentioned, I thought was going to be voting for us or advocating for us, he, in June, when we were hearing about kids in cages, we were hearing about the kinds of things that were happening at the border, the humanitarian crisis that was happening over there, and our role in separating families, our role in, unfortunately, treating kids the way we still do, and the fact that folks are still dying. And 2 weeks after that, there was an emergency appropriations bill that came up in Congress. And my Congress member led the charge to make sure that there were no guardrails and no accountability in this bill that gave millions of dollars to CBP and ICE, the same agencies that were responsible for enforcing the kinds of policies that we had in terms of separating kids, in terms of tearing apart families, in terms of propagating the humanitarian crisis that we had over there. And to me, when he did that, he made me, as a volunteer, as a former supporter of his, morally complicit in that decision making and in that decision. And I really couldn't be morally complicit in that anymore. And that was the event that turned the tide for me, that made me feel as if I needed to get into that race. And I needed to make sure that we had people in Congress who were going to draw those lines, who were going to stand up for the kinds of values that we need to make sure that people are standing up for. Because the thing is, no matter how you feel about comprehensive immigration reform, no matter how you feel about undocumented folks, I think as Americans, we all can agree, and we all do agree, that the crisis that's happening right now is inhumane, and that we need to do everything we can to make sure that we keep people safe. And the fact that my Congress member could not only not advocate for that, but ensured that we were not putting any accountability in to even have a modicum of control or modicum of oversight was reprehensible. And at the least, we need to do more.
So if our listeners would like to help out your campaign between now and June 2nd, or whenever the primary ends up being, what are some ways that they can help out?
Oh, I would love any and all help we can get. We are looking for folks who can volunteer, and folks can do this remotely. We have a ton of that happening. They can go to our website, aratiforcongress.com, and that's ARATIFOR Congress.com. We are looking for folks to spread the word, to share. If you share the values, if you believe in any way, shape, or form in what I'm trying to do here, I would love it if you were able to share information about the campaign. And of course, this is a grassroots campaign. I'm not taking corporate PAC money or fossil fuel money. So donations and support in that way are always essential, necessary, and welcome. So any amount of money that you can spare, that you can share, goes a long way in this campaign. So we'd love donations as well. But volunteering remotely, being able to share information about our campaign and amplify our message, and donating, all of those can be done. And I would really appreciate that. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we have a website, and all of it is aratiforcongress.com.
All right, and we'll be sure to put links up on our website. Is there anything else that you'd like to make sure we talk about today?
I've been thinking a lot, right, since in this pandemic that we are in this crisis that is affecting all of us. And at the end of the day, we're going to find that this is a collective series of traumas that we all are going to be dealing with, some more than others, or some more deeply than others. I think that at the end of the day, we all need to understand and concentrate on being able to have folks in decision-making roles that are going to advocate for all of us. They're going to advocate for policies that are going to make us more resilient in the future. And to me, more than ever, the kinds of things that I've been fighting for. So to make sure that we collectively and decisively do something about climate change in less than the decade that we have left to mitigate the worst effects, to make sure that we have policies in place to help with healthcare. Healthcare should never be tied to our jobs. To be able to make sure that we have policies in place that for paid sick leave and family leave. All of those things are necessary now more than ever. We need to have a stronger social safety net for all Americans moving forward. So my hope is that folks are able to not only understand that viscerally now, hopefully that's a silver lining, but I see all of us coming together. I mean, my community coming together really to help in this crisis. And I'm hoping that that same sense of community spirit is retained as we come out of this crisis and translates into policies that work for all of us. And I hope that everyone is staying healthy and continues to be so.
Arati, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I wish you a lot of luck. I live very near the district that Marie Newman is in, and of course, Marie was able to win in her primary just like a month ago now. I guess it was only a few weeks ago. Time has all compressed together. But, I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to see the same thing in your district.
Yeah, I am too. I think similar to what Marie Newman did, we are also putting together a broad coalition of suburban moms and progressive voters from endorsements from organizations like Vote Mama that we just had yesterday, to Working Families Party and Indivisible and Progressive Change Campaign Committee. All of those, show that we really have a movement that's happening here. So I remain hopeful there as well. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Sophie, it's good to have you back on the podcast as well. And I hope that everybody stays home, stays safe, and saves lives.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.